Okay, I think we are now hopefully live. So welcome everybody to our Q&A on studying music at Cambridge. We're really sorry that we can't be with you in person this year for our open days, but we're really looking forward to answering your questions across the course of the next 45 minutes or so. And if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the live chat. And I can see that there are lots of questions appearing already. So we'll get onto those in just a second. My name's Delphine Mordy. I'm the Outreach Coordinator here at the Faculty of Music, and I'm also Director of Studies in Music at Newnham College, Churchill College and Wolfson College. I'm delighted to be joined by two of my colleagues and one of our final year students this afternoon to help answer your questions. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves now, starting with Catherine.
Hello, I'm Catherine Ellis. I'm the 1684 Professor of Music, which just means that in 1684 the university decided it was a really good idea to have a Professor of Music, and there's been one of us all the way through since 1684. I am a cultural historian of music. I work on late 19th and early 20th century France. I'm really interested in the way music works within society, the way people embrace different kinds of music, the way they reject different kinds of music, and the reasons why.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Sam Barrett. I'm a lecturer here in the music faculty with specialisms in medieval music and jazz, which share some features, but let's say modal features most commonly. I'm also a Director of Studies in Music at Pembroke College, and that gets me into all sorts of different areas of music. So I supervise in a range of musics between medieval music and jazz as well. And I'm still active as a singer and director of music as well, drawing on my background previously as an organ scholar and a choral volunteer.
Okay, and Cheryl.
Hi everyone, my name is Cheryl. I'm currently a third year music student at Robinson College. And my academic interests in music are specifically film music, so composition and theory, in addition to ethnomusicology, as well as popular music. Some musical activities I've been involved in include conducting the university's Chinese orchestra, as well as singing in my college's chapel choir and musically directing various musical theatre shows.
Okay, thanks so much. So as I said, lots of questions already coming in here. So the first one, and I think actually a couple of people have asked this question, what aspects of the music course are different between Cambridge and Oxford? Classic question. And I will admit that some of us here have in fact also studied at Oxford, so have a bit of experience of the two. Who would like to take this question on? Sam, perhaps?
I'll give it a go, although I'm very hesitant here because my knowledge of the Oxford course is in part dependent on what I did, and that was a while ago, and in part dependent on presentations such as this, which I've given with colleagues from Oxford sometimes, and I learn about their course. And I'll say the first thing that I learn about the course, the two courses when I look at them and we give our joint presentations, is quite how similar they are in terms of their overall structure and in terms of the opportunity that they're trying to give undergraduates to study a range of different topics and to have a wide choice as they do that. I know that's not the answer you're really after. I would just say one thing that has been said to me by more recent students who've moved between Oxford and Cambridge. I cannot vouch for its authenticity, but I'll simply report a view, which is that they say that in Cambridge we do get into the notes quite a lot, and we like ways of dealing with notes. And in Oxford, they do that, of course, but they also try to bring in wider cultural considerations. Not that we don't do that, but they do maybe slightly less notes than us. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. I don't know if that's a stereotype. I simply report a view.
I guess there's a more or sort of very practical difference as well, which is in terms of the exam structure. So in Oxford, there are no second year exams, whereas we have exams at the end of every year. The exams that we have at the end of each year don't count towards the overall final degree. So we are end weighted. So 100% of your final degree is on your final year at Cambridge. But it does mean that you will study a range of courses each year and be examined on them each year, whereas at Oxford, the second and third year are examined together at the end of the course. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both systems, but that is one core difference, I think.
I think we can also say that in Oxford there is a system of what's known as collections, which is college exams, which are done either I think at the beginning of each term. And in some ways, those are something that there's certainly things that we don't do, but they substitute in some way for the fact that we on paper seem to examine more than Oxford does, but actually when you're on the ground, I'm not sure that we do.
Okay, thank you. So the next question we have here is, what does a normal week look like studying music at Cambridge? I wonder if Cheryl can perhaps kick us off with that as giving the student experience.
Yeah, I can walk you through a typical day, and if you multiply that by 7, then I guess that's a week. So what normally happens is you have your lectures in the morning, and those generally last from an hour to 2 hours long. You may go to 1 or 2 different lectures. Again, this depends on your modules and when they occur within the school year. And then what happens in the afternoons generally for me is supervisions. So these are this, a unique style of teaching to the Oxford system. And they're small group teaching sessions really, where you really get to go in depth into a topic one-on-one with an academic who's of course as passionate and as knowledgeable as they can be. And this is where you basically discuss, and you write essays for these supervisions, and you really get to delve deeper into the topic and really discuss it further. And so that usually happens in the afternoons. And I will mention that as a music student, you're going to be doing more other than writing essays, of course. You're going to also maybe perform. You would probably go to rehearsals. You can see other concerts, for example. And so the majority of my day is basically a mixture of going to different lectures, working on supervision work, going to supervisions, or doing all sorts of rehearsals or performances.
Okay. There is a sort of related question, which is how many essays do music students usually write per week? That's going to vary a little bit, particularly from year to year. As we go into second and third year, then there are different options that students can take, which will have different numbers of essays. So it's sort of hard to answer, but you might expect to write maybe 2 essays a week, certainly in first year, I think. Would you say that's about right, Cheryl? Or?
Yeah, 1 to 2.
Okay. Are the entry requirements the same for all the colleges? Well, there are a couple of things to say about this. So we do have certain entry requirements, which are the requirements to study music at Cambridge. So we do look for a music qualification. So ideally A-level music or equivalent. So music higher for the IB. But if that's not possible, then we do also accept grade 8 theory at merit or above, usually as an alternative. And that's accepted by all of the colleges as an alternative to A-level music or equivalent. The minimum standard offer for Cambridge is A-star AA. The A-star doesn't usually have to be in music. Though 1 or 2 colleges might ask for that. So that does vary a little bit from college to college. And the colleges can set their own offers after the interviews have taken place and so on. Usually in response to the whole application, if there are any concerns, they might decide to see if you can get a slightly higher grade in a particular subject, or there can be a little bit of variation in what is required of students by the individual colleges, but the entry requirements are for doing music are standard across the colleges. So it's a slightly vague answer, but it is one of the complications and joys of Cambridge is that the individual colleges can vary slightly from each other. So it's not entirely uniform. Don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that, if I've missed anything.
I don't think so.
Okay. So what parts of the first year of study are compulsory, if any? Perhaps Catherine, you could take us through that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, many of you will be aware that we have a revised degree that will be coming in 2021. In the first year, there are compulsory courses in music and contemporary societies, which is a very wide-ranging course where you're thinking about the ways that music has been conceptualized as a contemporary phenomenon, including popular musics, including classical musics, including world musics. You will have a course in tonal skills, which is harmony and counterpoint. You'll have a course in Western music history. You'll have a course in general musicianship, and you'll have a course in analysis. And the course in analysis will also be quite mixed. It won't just be Western classical music. It will be approaches to analysis of various different kinds of music. So posing the questions of how we can approach different kinds of music. And you may well be very pleased to hear that the general musicianship, important though it is, counts as a half paper rather than a whole paper, and that probably gives you just a sense of where it sits. Then you have the options. So we then ask you to pick 2 half-unit options from an extended essay, or composition, or performance, or a new history workshop course that we are running, which really enables people who are enthusiastic about history to get their feet dirty and to think about historical sources and the kinds of questions we can ask about them. So that is a kind of boot camp for budding historians.
Thank you. So the next question we have is, how many opportunities are there for your compositions to be recorded or performed? I think the answer to that is a huge number of opportunities. And Cheryl, as a composer, do you want to perhaps say a few words about your experience of the opportunities you've had?
Yeah. So if you do choose composition modules with that, for your coursework, you will get opportunities to record these. And usually what you're assessed on, you're assessed on a composition, but usually accompany that with a recording. And so, of course, you get many opportunities to record your compositions, and we also have different facilities and resources at the faculty which allow for this, including a recording studio as well as different types of recording technologies. I'd say outside of the TRIPO, so outside of the curriculum, and just in general Cambridge, in terms of general Cambridge music opportunities, you'd also get opportunities to record your compositions. There are usually composition festivals. I believe the Minerva Festival has had a Women in Composition Festival event kind of thing, where women composers were encouraged to send in different recordings of their compositions, and they were showcased. So to echo Delphine's point, yes, there are many opportunities to do so.
Yeah, and across all genres as well. And certainly I had one student who was really keen on music theatre, so wrote her own musical in her final year. I don't really know how she found the time to do it, and staged it in one of the colleges in their auditorium, and then took it to the Edinburgh Fringe later that summer. Had students writing operas. There's a new, I think, student society for putting on contemporary student operas, jazz compositions, lots of opportunities for choral works to be performed. I think there are just so many keen and enthusiastic musicians who are really willing to work with each other, that if you want to put on a concert of your music, there are the spaces, the resources, and the people to help you to make that happen. Often within colleges as well, you might find there's some financial support to help you to put on events. And as Cheryl said, we have other sort of festivals, the Minerva Festival, which had a composition competition. And composition is also supported very much by the faculty, not least through the Composer Workshop series, which in addition to bringing in composers to come, so professional composers to come and speak to our students, we also have specialist performers coming in to talk through different kinds of composition techniques and so on. And we have a new music ensemble as well at the faculty that performs not only established works in the contemporary musical canon, but also works by our students. So a huge number of opportunities there. Okay, following on from that, we also have the question, how many performance opportunities are there? Well, I think an infinite number, but again, Sam, do you want to take that?
Yeah, well, goodness me. If you wanted to perform in a concert every night of your student life in Cambridge, you could. I mean, that's the simple way of putting it. There are so many performance opportunities that the world is your oyster once you're here. And this is because there are various levels to music making within the university. So at one level you have the colleges, and each college will have its own music society that's usually putting on weekly recitals, as well as end of term concerts, and as well as occasional projects that are being put on. And those are open to a wide range of people, wide range of abilities to do all sorts of things. If you ever wanted to put on a performance of Belshazzar's Feast or something, you can, amazingly, you can do this through from one end, the high art, incredibly complex works, through to just, if you just want to play this piece, put it on and put it together with a group of friends, you can do that as well. So those opportunities exist on a college level. At the university level, we have our orchestras through the Cambridge University Music Society. There's also the IAS scheme, which is a chamber music scheme, which is providing specialist chamber music coaching at a high level. But we go through from that to student-led societies. There's the Jazz Society. There's the Gilbert and Sullivan Society. There's the Opera Society. There's the Cayley Band Society. It goes on and on and on. There's the Folk Music Club, etc., etc. There's the Samba Club. So all varieties of music are catered for. Concerts at all levels are provided. Finding the audience can sometimes be a little bit tricky, but I've never been to a concert at Cambridge yet without an audience. It's been on the edge sometimes, 2 or 3 for some of these very small ones, but you're going through from that through to 500 people in West Road, through to 800, 1,000 people sometimes in the chapel, in the very large chapel venues that we have as well. So, I mean, it's a cornucopia of concerts, it really is.
Thank you. So next question that we have, is it true that Cambridge is considering going fully online for the next year? And how would this work for music, particularly performance?
Shall I take that one? It isn't true that Cambridge is going completely online, unless, of course, we are back in absolute lockdown. The way that we are investigating teaching is to make the most that we possibly can of socially distanced learning. We will be putting some lectures online, but we're also measuring up all our spaces to see how many students we can get in there with 2-meter distancing and with 1+ distancing. We will be putting as much in-person teaching in place for next year as we possibly can. And that includes, of course, what we can do on a large concert hall stage with performance, and also in terms of composition and visiting artists and visiting speakers. So the short answer is no, and the long answer is that this is a process and we are reacting to government advice all the time, but we are doing our very best to bring into the faculty as much face-to-face teaching as we possibly can.
Thank you. So we have a question, another question about the instrumental award scheme. So is the harp an included instrument of the instrumental award scheme? I think Sam can take that.
I should take that. So there are a number of instruments that we consider for the instrumental award scheme on a case-by-case basis. We have had double basses, for example, join us for projects, and we have had harpists also join us in the past. We tend to consider them for individual groups and individual pieces, and then think about the coaches we need to bring in to support that. So the best thing you can do is, in fact, write to us through the contact pages, say that you're interested as a harpist, and then we will look at the possibilities. But I can certainly confirm that we have had harpists on the scheme before.
Thank you. So the next question we have is from a composer who's asking whether there's a college that has a particularly strong focus on composition. I think I would say here that there are opportunities for composers, whatever college you're at. There are certain colleges where the director of studies or one of the fellows in music is a composer. And so when you're thinking about which colleges you want to apply to, that might be a factor that you could consider as part of your decision making. It shouldn't necessarily be a determining factor. There are all sorts of reasons why students will choose different colleges. But if you do apply, or if you do go to a college that has a composer at the college, then you may have slightly more access to that composer there than you might at another college. Having said that, I've had plenty of students, I'm not a composer myself, I've had plenty of students at my college who are very, very keen composers and have worked with our composition specialists and have lots of opportunities to perform their music across the university. I don't know, as a composer, Cheryl, I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
I'd say for me, it was one of the deciding factors, but not the main deciding factor by any means. So I'm at Robinson College and my director of studies is obviously a composer, and I was an aspiring composer when I first applied. So I figured it would be the best way for me to really get down and dirty with composition. However, with that being said, I don't think you should base your college choice on your director of studies specialism.
Thank you. The next question is, do you have to sit an entrance exam before you're offered an interview? And the answer is no. So there's no centralized assessment for music. The decision to invite candidates to come for interview is made on the basis of your application. There's no assessment before you come for interview. When you do, well, it's a slightly complicated situation this year in that the university has now announced that we won't be interviewing in person this December, but we will still be interviewing, and we're working on how that's going to work, the process for the remote interviews. And so there will be more information coming out very shortly about exactly what form the interviews will take this year. But there won't be a centralized test before being invited to interview. The next question we have is, which books do you recommend to prepare for the course? Well, I can start to answer that a little bit in that. So we do have a page on our faculty website, and I'll pop that on the YouTube page below this video so that you've all got a link to that, where we do recommend some texts for students who are thinking about studying music at university, and also for our offer holders, just some introductory texts to help to start you thinking about some of the things that you'll be covering during your degree. A good starting place is always the very short introductions produced by Oxford University Press, which are sort of nice and short, but give a very good kind of overview and things to think about in relation to the subject. So there's a very short introduction to music by Nicholas Cook, who's a former 1684 professor at our faculty. There's also a very short introduction to ethnomusicology and to world music that give a sort of a broader introduction to the musics that you can study at Cambridge. I don't know if my colleagues would like to suggest any other texts.
I would say only that there are slightly different things in play here. The books that we recommend are for those offer holders and those people who are thinking about taking the degree in music, and they're not necessary for those who are thinking of preparing for the interview, for example. You may want to have a look at that, but there's no sense that you must get through these texts before you come to interview. Not at all. I'll just mention one of the other very short introductions, which is to early music for those who are interested in that. One of those exists as well. And given that's an area of specialism of mine, I thought I'd bring it up at this point.
No bias
I'll just add one other text that might be of interest to you, called An Introduction to Music Studies, edited by Jim Sampson and Paul Harper Scott, which is a rather expanded version, covers some of the ideas that Nicholas Cook covers in the short introduction, but does it in a rather more workbook fashion with some interpolated ideas and activities.
Thank you. Actually, Cheryl, having done the degree, was there anything that you found particularly helpful in preparation, or that you wish you had done?
I think one of the series that I read a lot prior to my interview was the Richard Taruskin's Oxford History of Western Music, and because you get a huge series of, I think, 6 or 7 volumes. And I just kind of go through the table of contents, find a chapter I liked, okay, I'm going to go read that and skim it over. And I think it was just a way for me to get exposed to as much musical content about history, about different works, different composers that I hadn't encountered before. It was just a way for me to sort of quickly absorb all this information and just to broaden my own horizons.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think the Taruskin can seem quite intimidating. If any of you know it, it's a huge series of volumes. But as Cheryl said, just dipping into it and actually sort of selecting certain chapters, perhaps to pursue particular interests that you have in certain areas, or where you think there's a gap in your knowledge that you'd like to fill. You don't have to read these books from start to finish. You can sort of dip into them. And in fact, the next question is related to this. So how would you best recommend preparing for interviews? And as Sam said, we certainly don't prescribe any reading that you have to do before interviews. We'd like you to do some reading, thinking, listening, but it doesn't have to be anything in particular. You can really pursue your areas of interest, but actually trying to always think through what it is about a piece of music that interests you, or whether you agree or disagree with the arguments that you've been reading in a text, and then to practice actually talking about these ideas that you've had, because that's the thing that often students find very difficult to interview, is that it's often the first time that they've really been asked to talk through their thoughts and arguments on music. And so the more practice that you can get at doing that with anyone who'll listen to you about any aspects of music and any musics, that's really the best preparation. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that.
I would add simply, actually, and this is something that's often overlooked, simply preparing the work you've done at school, going over that, being aware of it, and then of course anything that you've mentioned in your personal statement, being ready to talk about that and to expand upon that, because these are natural things for us to ask about. And so it's not just a question of going off and demonstrating you've done something very interesting in one area, but actually to demonstrate the areas that you studied at A-level, that you've taken those a little bit further as well. You've thought about those, thought about how they might fit in with your other interests, thought about the wider issues at stake there. I think that's also important as well.
Thank you. Okay. Lots of questions coming in here. How many opportunities within the course are there to specialize? For example, specializing in composition or jazz? Catherine, do you want to?
Yes, by all means. The course is actually structured so that there are certain strands that go right the way through. And just to take the composition question to start with, one of the reasons that we changed the course for 2021 was because we found that students felt very limited, because in the first year they could do either performance or composition, but not both. And so we wanted to design something that enabled students to be able to do both and to take their composition right the way through from year 1 to year 3. So from that point of view, there is, of course, a huge amount of specialization that's possible. But there's also the aspect of pastiche composition in tonal skills, in harmony and counterpoint, which very quickly in year 2 turns into applied tonal skills. And as part of that applied tonal skills, that can include options in transcription and arrangement, orchestration, and also in film scoring. So your compositional interests can find their way into film scoring from year 2 and then move into year 3 in the same way. And similarly, there are pastiche composition and fugue options in year 3 as well. So for those of you who are really interested in manipulating notes and being creative with notes, then there are strands that are going to help you a great deal. In terms of jazz, I will pass across to Sam fairly soon, but within the general musicianship, we have for a long time had a jazz option for students who are particularly well versed in jazz. And there is always jazz within the Music and Contemporary Society's strand, and you will find that there are sometimes specialist options with jazz as well. And of course, then there's a dissertation, an extended essay stream, which goes right the way from year 1 to year 3, where you can basically indulge your passions. And if your passion is jazz, then you can do that 3 times over as well. Sam, is there anything you want to add to that?
I will simply add an example of a student that I've just finished talking to at the end of his second year. And he came to me as a student who was passionately interested in jazz. And for his final papers, he took a notation portfolio in jazz, where he looked at big band jazz music, how it's notated. He did a performance option that was all jazz. He did a dissertation with me on Wynton Marsalis and jazz things. He wrote a decolonization paper here, which he mentioned jazz centrally. He took a pop paper as his 5th paper, in which there were jazz inflected genres that he could bring in. And it was only the 6th paper where he struggled a bit, and that was music and science. So he managed to get 5 of his 6 papers to bring in his specialism, and he managed to avoid the Western canon altogether. Not that he wasn't interested in it and hadn't studied it over the first 2 years, but it does show that if you put your mind to it within the course, especially by the time you get to the part 2, our 3rd year, that you can bring your specialisms to bear very strongly.
Thank you. So the next question, does the faculty have period instruments for use in student performances? Sam, do you want to
I'll take this? Yes, we have developed, and we started this about 15 years ago, and we now have a complete Baroque orchestra in terms of instruments. So these are replicas of Baroque instruments, and they are available for students to use throughout the year. And our director of performance is herself a Baroque instrument specialist, and so she oversees this collection and talks to the students about the instruments they're taking, and advises them on both on practices they might use, but also teachers and opportunities for them. So this is certainly an area of strength. We also have, I should say, many historic keyboards, both at the faculty and within the colleges also.
Thank you. So the next question is, how do admissions assessments at different colleges at interview differ? So there is, as I said earlier, some variation from college to college. There are some elements that are fairly standard across all of the colleges. So it's common to have 2 interviews for music. Sometimes that will be 2 subject interviews that are both run by music academics. Sometimes you might have 1 subject interview run by the Director of Studies at the college to which you've applied and another music academic. And then the second interview would be a general interview, usually run by the admissions tutor. In the subject interviews, it's common across the colleges to be asked to look at a piece of music and to discuss it, and to be given a text about music, so maybe a bit of music history, or a text, a sort of cultural history text or ethnomusicological text, quite short. You'd be asked to read it and then to discuss it during the interview. And what we're doing there, it's a little bit like the supervisions, the small group classes that we run in Cambridge, where we give our students some work to do, to read, to think about, and then we discuss it. And so that's a common procedure across the interviews. There are then some different tests that different colleges will do. So some might include a harmony and counterpoint test. That's usually, not always, but quite often a Bach chorale format where you'd be asked to complete missing parts of a Bach chorale. There are sometimes some brief keyboard tests and also oral tests. You can find out, or the best thing to do to find out exactly what the interview arrangements are at the different colleges is to contact the Director of Studies in Music at that college to ask for a few more details about how the interview process is run. And if you go to our faculty website, there's a page for students who are thinking of applying to study music at Cambridge. And there you'll find a list of all of the colleges, and you can click on each college and it will take you directly to the page about music at that college. So I would encourage you to do that. As I said earlier, we are in a slightly uncertain time where there will be some changes to the interview procedures this year, as we won't be doing them in person, but remotely. So I would urge you to keep looking at the university web pages about admissions to check the latest announcements, and the colleges will also provide updated information about how the interviews will run this year. So the next question we have, are there any harmony practice papers to prepare for the interview exam? Well, there aren't any that we have, partly because not every college does have harmony tests in advance. But again, always good to check with the college that you're thinking of applying to check what the interview procedure will be there, and you can always ask for advice of the directors of studies at those colleges. Roughly what proportion of students enter careers directly involving music? Sam, do you want to take that one?
It's a very good question. The last time I looked at these statistics, which was a few years ago, I thought they roughly divided into thirds. So that about a third of our students went immediately after graduation to some kind of performance-related or composition-related activity, often going on to further study in those areas. About another third went into music-related activities, I can put it like that, in terms of teaching, music administration, for example. And then a third of our students seemed to go off into careers that had very little ostensibly to do with music, whether that was into the civil service, or they were going into charity work, or they were going off into all sorts of things. One of our previous organ scholars is now a pilot, for example. And another one is a journalist. Another one is working as an art dealer. So I roughly saw it in terms of thirds, and my experience as a director of studies over the years is roughly that. I see my students continue their music skills in one form or another, I have to say, but sometimes simply alongside careers that are taking them into all sorts of interesting areas, and sometimes directly related to music.
Thank you. We've got lots of questions in it. Try and get through some of these quickly. Are there any opportunities to write music for college choirs or college-run ensembles? The answer is yes, absolutely. Huge numbers of opportunities. Lots of the choirs, chapel choirs and non-chapel choirs and ensembles will be very happy to provide opportunities to perform works by student composers. So the next question, there seems to be a large emphasis on chamber music. What about opportunities for bigger works or jazz? Is there a big band? Well, yes, there is. There are lots of big bands, actually. There's the Cambridge University Jazz Orchestra, which is affiliated with the University Musical Society, but there are lots of other big bands too, Churchill Jazz Band, Fitz Swing, and so on. sort of very large-scale orchestras. The University Orchestra performed Mahler's Second Symphony earlier this year. It's not, although we have an instrumental award scheme for chamber music, it's by no means the only thing that we do. The variety is enormous. In terms of instrumental lessons, are they an additional cost, and can we take lessons in multiple instruments? Sam, do you want to take that one, perhaps?
I'll take that quickly. If you're taking instrumental lessons and you're doing performance in the tripos, i.e. part of your degree, then there are guaranteed amounts of sums from the colleges to support you in that. And it's 420 in the first year, 540 in the second year, and £700 in the third year. You'll also find that colleges support all those, especially music students who are having lessons, and they will prepare a proportion of their lesson costs, even if they're not doing performance as part of their degree. Quite often in colleges, that's around about 50% of the lesson costs, find some kind of support within the colleges. There's natural variation between the colleges on that. And just to answer the last part of the question, if you're doing more than one instrument, yes, that's usually catered for music students within the colleges, again, through the individual funding. And it can be done in all sorts of different ways, whether if you're a choral and organ scholar, the lessons will come as part of it. If you're in the IAS, you'll get some support for lessons. If you're doing the degree, you'll get some support for lessons. And then these general support music funds as well within colleges to support lessons. They tend to look most favorably, of course, on music students because this feeds in somehow in very varied ways to their degrees. So there's plenty of different types of support available.
Thank you. And actually, this may be one for you too, Sam. What is the largest proportion of performing we can take if we aren't as comfortable focusing on composition?
I'll pass this one to Catherine, actually. I think she can take this one.
In terms of the degree itself, it's possible to do performance in all three years. It will constitute in terms of year 3, which is the one that really counts. It will constitute a sixth of what you do. But we're always thinking about new possibilities, and it may well be that by the time the first year that you might be in 2021 reaches the third year, that might be increased. We're always talking about increasing and rebalancing the way that the degree works. But at the moment, certainly you will be able to do performance in all 3 years.
Thank you. We are about out of time. I'm just going to take 1 or 2 more questions, but what I'll say is that I will try to answer as many questions in the live chat once the stream has finished. So I'll spend a bit of time typing up some answers to what we haven't had time to cover. And you're also very welcome to email outreach@mus.cam.ac.uk, and we'll try and answer any questions that you have that we haven't had time to cover today. I think, let me just find where I was up to here. There's a question about written work that's submitted for as part of the application process, and whether that needs to be external to work completed for A-level music. And the answer is absolutely not. We encourage and ask for the work that you submit to be A-level work, ideally marked by your teacher as well. So it shouldn't be produced externally to your A-levels, unless you don't have essays that you've been writing, or if you don't have the work that you've been asked to submit, then you can always contact the college to which you're applying. You contact the admissions office and explain if you're unable to provide the work that's been asked for, and then they'll find an alternative solution for you. Okay, and one other question here is, do I need to get an all-rounded balance of marks for all 3 areas of the A-level in order to have a good chance of getting in? So I'd say to that, we do look for at least an A at A-level music, but if you're stronger in one area than another, then that's absolutely fine. We don't expect our students to be good at absolutely everything. Some are going to be stronger performers than others. Some will be more interested in composition than others. Some are more interested in history and theory and so on. All students come to us with a different range of interests and enthusiasms, and that's partly what makes it so exciting and so wonderful to work with such a diverse body of students. We are out of time, I'm afraid. I'm sorry we didn't manage to get through all of your questions, but as I say, I'll do my best to answer as many of these as possible in the live chat. I'd like to thank my colleagues and Cheryl for joining me this afternoon, and thank you all for tuning in and watching this Q&A and for all of your questions. I hope it's been helpful, and as I say, please do email with any further questions and we'll do our very best to answer them. Thank you.